Hi, everyone. I'm Reverend Nikki Happy, the Director of Marketing and Engagement at One Spirit. And I'm so excited to be sitting here today with Reverend Barbara Becker and Reverend David Wallace. How are you both?
Hey, Nikki, good to see you.
It's great to be here.
Great. We're here to discuss your workshop. And so before we do that, I would just love for you both to introduce yourselves.
Well, quickly, I just retired as dean at One Spirit, where I started teaching in 2004. And my role there has included bringing sacred text reading from all the traditions into the education of the school.
And I am a proudly ordained One Spirit interfaith minister. And I served as a first year dean for a couple of years. I've worked with human rights advocates around the world for the past 25 years as my main career. And I am the author of a new book called Heartwood, The Art of Living with the End in Mind.
An excellent book, I will say.
Thank you.
And so, can you share with us the inspiration behind this workshop?
Sure. So, in the mid 1800s, a group of people formed in the area around Concord, Massachusetts. And some people call it a genius cluster because there was such an intense concentration of really smart, inquisitive people. And they included Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, Bronson Alcott, Louisa May Alcott, his daughter, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Elizabeth Peabody, Margaret Fuller. And these are people who had such an exponential influence on our culture even today, from literature to social justice to environmentalism and to our great interest, which is spirituality.
And for me, I've wanted to bring this material into the school for a decade. And Barbara, out of the blue, called and said she was burning with this idea and suggested we teach together. Because the other thing that's going on in the backstory is that the Eastern scriptures, the Vedas, the Gita, had just been translated into English and were just becoming a powerful information source into the Americas at this time. And so the marriage of Eastern and Western ideas really blossomed and became a focal point of American spirituality that resonates even today. So we're really excited about this.
And in addition to the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, the Transcendentalists published some of the very first translations of Buddhist sutras into English. They had a magazine called The Dial, which was edited by Margaret Fuller, and Elizabeth Peabody did the first translation of the Lotus Sutra. So they were drawing from Eastern traditions, and they also had a great interest in Native American culture as they understood it. And so they really were curious about the world around them. And that kind of curious, I think we find today in the type of spiritual but not religious even attitude, where a third of our population at this point is deeply spiritual but not quite sure where they land on religion.
Can you walk us through what this experience will be like for the participants?
Sure. So these early transcendentalists had a term called the Lyceum, and they would gather together in groups to discuss, read, debate, play music, and entertain one another about what they were thinking. So our thought is that our classroom together is going to be our own Lyceum. We're going to take some of the classics of some of these great, great transcendentalists and break them down and dig in deep and see not only how they touched them during the 1800s, but what they have done for society and what they do for us internally as well.
Every evening we'll read a little, we'll discuss a little, we'll digest a little, and we'll also do some practice. The great flourishing that happened in this time was an invitation back into nature, using nature both as metaphor and as inspiration, a deep trust in our own inner wisdom, so that the individual's experience was more important than any theology or dogma. This is a time when the American churches were in deep conversation about what was old world and what was the new world still being born. And this is a conversation that's so of the moment that we're living. At this time when many of us have experienced despair and isolation, where it's easy to lose hope, and certainly in the national fabric, to be confused about how we're ever going to come back together again, to be reminded of the common vision that was born on this continent, that though we are individuals, we're all held by what Emerson deemed as an oversoul, that is to say, a common thread of humanity and divinity. If we could have just another kiss of that in our lives, how much better and easier it would be to be one with another.
Mhm. And so what would you like the takeaway to be for students after they've had this 4-week experience?
I'm going to read to you one little line from Henry David Thoreau's Walden. When Henry David Thoreau went out to live at Walden Pond for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days, he had a mission statement, and it went like this. He said, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." I go over that passage many times. There's so much I love in it, but that question, I wished to live deliberately. What is it like to understand what the Transcendentalists understood and to live that deliberately in our own lives?
To live deliberately, to walk our talk, requires that we articulate what's in our heart, what the path looks like, what does look like to those behind us, and hopefully could be a blessing for those ahead of us.
So I think we're going to do that. We're going to not treat these as pieces of literature and philosophy from way out there, but to really internalize it and make it ours.